She pleaded to exchange her infant for sustenance, but the rancher remained silent, then accepted both. Western frontier, winter of 1871. The flakes had engulfed all, pathways, enclosures, even the echoes of existence. A modest settlement tucked against the slopes now resembled a chilled burial ground more than anything. Gusts wailed like predators through the tight gorge. The atmosphere nipped profoundly, unforgiving. At the outermost rim of the dale, where the terrain sank downward and saplings rose stark against the heavens, a solitary spread endured. Vapor rose from its flue, a strand of comfort in a realm rendered pale. Mara staggered toward it, scarcely upright. She was 24. Her mouth was chapped and oozing, her features flushed from exposure. She clutched her newborn girl firmly to her bosom, enveloped in a flimsy scarf already encrusted with frost. Her soles ached in drenched footwear. Her digits were numb. But graver than her personal torment was the hush within the parcel she bore. The babe was still, far too still. Mara possessed nothing remaining to nourish her. Her frame, depleted by chill and terror, produced no sustenance. The little one had ceased wailing hours earlier. Now she scarcely inhaled. Mara knew she. 3 dwellings prior, Mara had begun rapping. The initial instructed her to depart. The next drew their drape back and allowed it to drop without comment. The third had banged the entrance with such vigor it shook the veranda. Now this marked the final one. A faint radiance twinkled behind iced panes. Somewhere within, a blaze roared. A wonder. She arrived at the entrance and tapped once. Then once more feebler footfalls. The portal groaned ajar. A fellow occupied the opening, lofty, wide-framed, with a light in one grasp and a firearm propped against the frame. His jacket was mended, his countenance obscured by whiskers and quietude. But his gaze, slate-hued, subdued, inscrutable, a gaze that had witnessed tempests and endured. Mara's tone fractured as she uttered exhale stuttering from frigidity and despair. "I'm only requesting a morsel of loaf," she stated. "Sufficient to produce nourishment for my child, I beg." The fellow offered no response. His stare shifted downward to the youngster in her embrace. Then he pivoted marginally as if preparing to retreat indoors. That lone gesture almost shattered her. "No, hold on!" Her tone broke into a weep. She sank to her knees on the deck, flakes seeping through her hem. Droplets cascaded warm against iced features. "Please accept the loaf." "Accept her!" she wailed, raising the babe with both palms. "I merely wish for her to survive." She lowered her brow, mortified by the phrases, but they emerged regardless. "You may retain her," she murmured. "She merits a cozy abode." "I cannot provide that. I've attempted." There was no exaggeration in her entreaty, no spectacle, just the unfiltered resonance of one who had naught left to negotiate except her own offspring inside. The blaze popped softly. The man, Kalen Voss, lingered immobile for an extended instant. Then he advanced. Without uttering, he set the firearm aside and removed his substantial jacket. Stooping, he enveloped it around the parent and child, folding the edges tenderly under Mara's jaw. His palms were coarse yet cautious. He avoided her gaze. Then he rose, swiveled back, and swung the portal wide. Mara winked up at him, astonished. He uttered nothing, simply lingered. Her limbs hardly complied. But when she faltered, his limb extended beneath hers, stabilizing, assisting, directing her over the sill. Heat surged like a torrent. Within, the blaze was genuine. The warmth caused her joints to weaken. She tripped, and once more he steadied her. He guided her to the fireplace and knelt next to her, unfolding the babe with skilled grips. The little one fidgeted faintly, her mouth shifting. Mara pressed her visage to the child's crown, weeping in solace. At her rear, the portal sealed. Beyond, the gusts shrieked, but they could not reach them any more. Mara perched near the blaze, her form still quaking despite the thick jacket draped across her frame. Her damp gown adhered to her flesh like an additional sheath of frost, and her digits quivered as she attempted to massage vitality back into them. Her footwear, saturated, rested forsaken by the entrance. Her inhalations arrived in brief draws, part fatigue, part incredulity. Beside her, baby Laney rested swaddled in a gentle cover on a creased bedspread. The little one emitted no noise, only the subtle ascent and descent of her torso, affirming she yet drew breath. Her complexion had forfeited its rosiness. Now it lingered between ashen and azure. Mara's windpipe constricted. She drew her knees to her bosom, striving to heat herself with her own bodily warmth. The comfort of the space existed. She could sense it, but it appeared distant, like a recollection from an existence she no longer inhabited. From the rear of the lodge came the ting of alloy, then the rasp of timber against forged metal. The man, Kalen, reappeared shortly after. He proceeded without rush, without any hint of irritation or haste, just a muted existence, like the breeze amid firs. He positioned a modest dish of watery gruel on the surface beside her. Vapor twisted delicately from it, bearing a trace of grains and seasoning. Then, without speaking, he set a fabric parcel next to it. 3 creased cloths, worn thin yet spotless. He stooped beside the babe, his palm supported against the ground for equilibrium. He didn't contact her, just observed. His demeanor wasn't harsh, but it wasn't welcoming either. His countenance, like the terrain outside, displayed the scars of extended cold seasons. His gaze was indecipherable, but not frigid, more akin to a fellow who had witnessed excess. Mara extended for the dish, her fingers rigid and sluggish. It slid in her hold, almost overturning. She balanced it with both palms and drew it nearer to her thighs. The initial portion scorched her split mouth, but she persisted. "I didn't intend to surrender her," she murmured gently. Her tone trembled, scarcely an exhale. "I wasn't forsaking her. She gazed down at Lainey, droplets impending. I just desired her to possess an opportunity, a comfortable spot, a satisfied stomach. That's everything." The man offered no response. He merely observed the little one, eyes squinting faintly. Then an element glimmered within them. Remembrance. A blaze. A separate cold season. A teenier form. Years prior, this identical chamber had witnessed another struggle for survival. His boy Finn merely weeks along, scorching with illness. Kalen had remained awake throughout the night, stoking the flames like one obsessed. Flakes had barricaded the entrance. The trail vanished. The healer unattainable. He'd crouched next to Finn's bassinet, breath suspended each time the lad rasped. He'd murmured invocations to a deity he wasn't certain attended. And prior to even that, his spouse, wan and hemorrhaging, departed within moments of delivery. No wails, no alert, just quietude. He'd interred her at the rear of the outbuilding, the spade gliding in solidified soil, cradled Finn with quaking limbs, and vowed that the lad would endure, even if he must incinerate the globe to ensure it. Kalen winked. The fire snapped. The scent of smoke and wool settled between them. He looked at Mara now, truly looked, and in her hunched shoulders, in the way she hovered over her child with every ounce of herself, he saw what no words could express. This wasn't desperation born from selfishness. It was the kind born from love, raw and wild. She glanced at him and for the first time saw something more than caution in his gaze. She saw grief, and knowing, he stood slowly and walked to the wash basin, wet a towel with warm water and brought it back, pressing it gently into her hands. Still he didn't speak. Mara stared at the cloth, blinking fast. "Thank you," she said. So he gave only a small nod before retreating to another room, the sound of his boots heavy on the wooden floor. But something had changed. She felt it. A soft shift. A door cracked open. She looked around the room. A pair of small boots by the hearth. A wooden horse tipped on its side. A patched blanket draped over a second rocking chair. This house had known the sound of a child, and maybe, just maybe, it could again. The first thing Mara noticed when she awoke was warmth. Not just the blanket over her, or the fire still crackling, but the way the cold no longer sat heavy in her bones. The baby Lon lay wrapped in layers near the hearth, her cheeks pink, her tiny lips slightly parted in sleep. For a moment, Mara could hardly believe it. She sat up slowly, her joints aching, her clothes stiff from the dampness of days past, but her baby was warm, breathing easier. Someone had moved them in the night. The man. She turned toward the kitchen. He was already at the stove pouring something into a tin bowl. He glanced over once, then slid the bowl across Thedable. Supper or maybe breakfast. Mara could not tell any more what time it was, only that the food smelled faintly of potatoes and herbs. She whispered, "Thank you." He gave a slight nod, then stepped into the hallway and returned with a folded sweater, wool, worn but still soft. He set it gently beside her, not meeting her eyes. That night, he placed an extra log on the fire before retreating to his room. The next morning, Mara woke to the sound of hammering. She followed the noise to the side of the house and found Kalen outside, reinforcing the window shutters to her room. The wind had rattled them all night, and now he was sealing the gaps with thick wood slats. Did not look at her, just kept working. She watched a while, then returned inside, heart fuller than she wanted to admit. Each evening brought more quiet acts of care. A bowl of hot broth left near the bed, clean linens folded neatly, a cracked ceramic cup filled with warm water, placed where she could reach it in the night. He never asked questions, never intruded, but he noticed. When Laniani fussed, he would glance over, subtle concern flickering across his otherwise unreadable face. When Mara winced, walking across the cold floor, he slid a pair of woolen socks near the hearth without a word. By the fourth day, the silence between them no longer felt heavy. It felt safe. One evening, as the wind howled outside and the fire danced long shadows across the room, Mara turned to him. Her voice was small but steady. "My name's Mara." She paused, then looked down at the bundle in her arms. "Her name is Laniani." He didn't speak right away, just looked at them both. "Then Callan, just that, nothing more, and it was enough." She nodded later. As she tucked Laney in, she noticed something new. The quiet wasn't hollow anymore. It held shape. It had weight. For so long, silence had meant loneliness. Cold stares, closed doors. But here it was different. There was no judgment, no demand, only space. For the first time in what felt like forever, Mara didn't feel like a burden. She didn't feel in the way. She felt allowed. Callan sat by the fire, carving something into a small block of wood. She watched from across the room, the baby asleep in her arms. He wasn't a man who needed to speak. His hands did that for him. Every bowl of soup, every extra blanket, every window fixed without being asked. And in that, Mara understood something. This man, this stranger, was giving her more than food or shelter. He was giving her a chance. The fire crackled quietly. Outside, snow pressed against the windows, thick and heavy, muffling the world beyond. Inside, Mara sat hunched on the wooden chair near the hearth. Her arms wrapped around Lanny, who slept tucked against her chest. Callan sat at the edge of the table, whittling a piece of wood, the knife in his hand moving with slow precision. He did not speak, but she could feel his presence steady beside her. "I should tell you," she whispered, not looking up. "Why I came, why I was willing to give her away for bread." Kalen's hands stilled. She took a breath. "His name is Roy, my husband. Or was." Callan looked at her then, eyes dark, unreadable. "He used to be kind," she continued. "Before the war, he brought me flowers once, sang off Kiator wedding, held me when I was sick." The memories caught in her throat, turning bitter. But when he came back, he wasn't Roy anymore. Not really. The war took his voice and gave him rage. Had drank to silence the noise in his head. When he couldn't drown it, he let it out. Her hand moved over Laney's back instinctively, protectively. He would throw things, scream, but he never touched me until after Lanny was born. She paused. That night it was snowing hard. A storm just like the one outside now. Laniani was crying. I was half asleep. I heard his footsteps. Heard him say he couldn't take it anymore. Her voice broke. I got there just in time. He was standing at the open door, Laney in his arms. He looked at me and said, "Maybe she'll learn silence if the cold takes her." Callan's hand gripped the edge of the table. I didn't think. I just moved. Took her from his hands and ran. No shoes, no coat, just a blanket and fear. I didn't stop until the town was gone behind me. Mia looked up, finally meeting Callan's eyes. I've been walking ever since. The silence stretched. She waited, expecting judgment, expecting the sound of boots crossing the floor to show her out. Instead, Kin turned slowly toward the hearth. He reached for a split piece of cedar stacked beside the kindling, took his knife, and carved into it. The scratch of blade on wood was the only sound. Then he set the plank beside the fire, the words facing her. "You understand." Maya blinked. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Something inside her unclenched. Not completely, but enough. Across the room, a soft rustling broke the stillness. Finn had woken and padded into the space with sleep-heavy steps. His hair was toasted, his small arms wrapped around a threadbare blanket. He looked at Mara, then at the baby. Without hesitation, he crossed the floor and sat on the rug in front of the fire. "Can I hold her?" he asked, eyes bright. Mia hesitated, startled as she's little. But Finn was already reaching up gently. Colin moved to help, guiding the newborn into his son's lap with surprising ease. Finn cradled her carefully, legs crossed. "She's really small," he whispered. "She is," Mara said softly. He looked up, his voice full of innocent pride. "Papo says babies only cry when their bellies are cold. I can keep her warm. Is that okay?" Mama knew. Maya froze. Her heart skipped. Colleen stopped moving. The room seemed to still entirely. Finn's face was open, pure. Either adult answered, not right away. They looked at each other. Mara and Ken caught in that fragile moment, both breathless. Neither dared speak, as if words might shatter it. But in their eyes was something unspoken, a kind of understanding neither of them had asked for, yet both needed. Finn grinned, proud of himself, and leaned closer to Lainey. She stirred in his arms and made a soft cooping noise. Not a cry, just peace. Mara blinked hard, swallowing a lump in her throat. She hadn't known warmth like this still existed. Hadn't known a child could speak the very words her heart was too broken to shape. Kaelin reached for another log and tossed it into the fire. The flames rose gently, casting light over the faces of the two children curled together on the rug. And for the first time in years, Mara Lark did not feel like a woman on the run. She felt like she was home. It happened one quiet morning, just as the frost was beginning to lift off the porch rails. Mara was hanging linens in the pale winter sun when a voice called out from the edge of the fence line. "Mirror," she turned, heartbeat leaping. A man sat atop a dappled horse, broad-shouldered, grim-faced, wrapped in a worn overcoat with travel dust still clinging to his boots. "I knew it was you," he said, guiding the horse closer. "I'd heard rumors, but I didn't believe it till now." Mara took a step back, instinctively shielding Lainey, who was strapped to her chest in a sling. "You don't remember me, do you?" he continued. "Name's Whit. I knew Roy. I knew you. I know you." He gave her a long, judgmental look. "You ran off with his kid." Mara's breath caught. "I didn't save it." Whit cut in. "You disappeared in the middle of the night with his child. That's what people say. You're lucky it's me who found you and not the law." He turned his horse slightly. "But it will be. Roy's family has money. They'll send letters. They'll press charges. That baby ain't yours anymore. Not after what you pulled." Then he turned and rode off without another word, back toward the hills. By nightfall, the letter came. A rider passed through, handed Callan a folded envelope without dismounting. It was from Roy's older brother, Stampede, and sealed with his family's crest. "We've been informed that our niece is being held under unlawful circumstances. This will not be ignored. Return the child or face legal consequence." Mara stood by the fire, shaking, the paper trembling in her hands. "They're coming," she whispered. "They'll take her from me. I should have run further. I shouldn't have stayed." She moved toward the door, grabbing the small cloth bag she'd tucked under the stairs. Colin blocked her path. "You don't understand," she said, voice cracking. "They'll say I'm mad that I abandoned Roy, that I'm unfit. I don't have papers. I don't have witnesses. I don't have anything." Her eyes burned with panic. "I can't lose her." Colin stood silent. Then he turned toward the wall, opened the cabinet by the stove, and took down a long wooden box. From inside, he pulled a rifle. He checked the chamber, loaded a round, and rested it across his arm. Then, in a gravel, deep voice that scraped from a placer rarely used, he said, "You're not going anywhere." Maya blinked, stunned. "I won't let anyone take your child," he continued. "Or you." His voice was low but solid, and for the first time since she'd met him, she realized just how much weight he could carry behind silence. Aylin stepped forward, placed the rifle near the door, and turned to her. "They can send letters. They can send men. Let them," he said. "But they won't get past me." Mara felt her knees weaken, not from fear, but from something else. Something like safety. "I can ask you to do that," she whispered. "You didn't ask," he replied simply. Lainey stirred against her chest, letting out a small, soft whimper. Mia looked down at her child, then back at Kaelin. He was already moving, tightening the latch on the window, double-checking the locks, reinforcing, blaring. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. Mara sank into the nearest chair, burying her face in her hands. Colin knelt beside her, not touching her, not speaking. Just there, steady, like a wall she never knew she could lean against, and outside the wind began to rise. The sun was low when it happened, dripping orange over the horizon, casting long, sharp shadows across the yard. Mara was inside, rocking Lainey near the hearth, humming a half-forgotten lullaby, the kind her mother used to sing. The house was still quiet, too quiet, until the distant sound of hooves shattered it. She rose slowly, clutching Lainey to her chest. Through the front window, she saw the figure thin, slumped in the saddle, swaying with each step of the horse. Her breath caught Roy. He rode like a man half dead, but his eyes burned with something feral. His coat flapped in the cold wind, and a pistol hung loosely from his belt. When he reached the porch, he didn't dismount. He shouted, voice slurred but sharp. "Mara, I know you're in there." She backed away, heart hammering. "Open the damn door! You think you can just run off? Take what's mine. My wife, my kid?" Lainey whimpered. Mara held her tighter, panic rising. Roy dismounted with a stumble, staggered up the steps, and began pounding on the door with his fists. "You don't get to disappear. You don't get to hide." Mara looked around wildly. Colin wasn't home. He had taken Finn into town that morning. Something about a fever. There was no one else. She grabbed a chair and wedged it beneath the door handle. Her fingers shook as she fumbled with the lock, but it was too late. Roy roared, shoved his shoulder into the wood. The door cracked. With a final shove, it burst open. Mara screamed. He stormed inside, eyes wild, reaching for her. "You're coming with me," he hissed, grabbing her wrist. "Both of you." "No," she cried, twisting away, shielding Lainey with her body. He yanked her roughly. The baby wailed. Mara fell to her knees, clutching Lainey like a shield. And then, hoof-beats fast, heavy. The front gate slammed open. Colin. He jumped from the saddle before the horse had even stopped. The moment they saw the splintered door, the chaos inside, he moved. Silent, cold. Exact turned just in time to draw his pistol. The shot rang out. It missed. Hit the door frame with a crack. Colin didn't miss. His bullet struck Roy in the shoulder, spinning him backward with a howl. He collapsed to the floor, bleeding and cursing. Colin stepped forward, expression unreadable, rifle steady. Roy tried to crawl toward his gun. Colin kicked it away. He said nothing. Just knelt, bound Roy's wrists behind his back with a length of leather cord, then dragged him out into the yard. Roy thrashed, screamed, but Colin was a wall of calm. He tied the bleeding man to his own saddle, mounted his horse, and rode straight for the town. The ride was slow, deliberate, and the town was watching. By the time Kalin reached the main street, people had gathered. Shopkeepers stepped outside. Mothers hushed their children. The sheriff stood waiting on the steps of his office. Callan dismounted, pulled Roy from the horse, and let him drop to the dirt. Then he looked around. His voice, rough and graveled, carried through the hush. "This man threatened to kill a child," he said simply. The crowd murmured. One man spit into the dust. A woman gasped and covered her mouth. The sheriff knelt, checked Roy's wound, then looked at Callan and gave a grim nod. "We'll take it from here." They hauled Roy to his feet. He cursed all the way, but no one listened. As the townsfolk began to disperse, a woman, owner of the dry goods store, turned to her neighbor and muttered, "No wonder she ran." Mia stood far off just beyond the rise, Lainey in her arms. Colin looked up and found her eyes. He didn't smile, just gave her a quiet nod. She returned it, tears clinging to her lashes. By the end of the week, the wind in town no longer whispered scandal. It carried something else, respect, maybe even regret. Word of what had happened at the Voss Ranch spread faster than fire and dry brush. The tale grew as it passed from porch to parlor. How Kalin Voss, the silent widower, had ridden into town with a bound man bleeding from the shoulder, declaring him a danger to a mother and her child. How the townsfolk had watched the law haul Roy Lark away, while Mara stood on the outskirts, her baby clutched to her chest, her face pale but unflinching. People who once crossed the street to avoid her now nodded as she passed. The same mouths that had muttered behind cupped hands offered cautious greetings, sometimes even a smile. At the general store, Mrs. Halverton, the butcher's wife, approached Mia without hesitation. She pressed a parcel into her hands, soft, wrapped in a clean square of muslin. "Read in lard," she said quietly. "For the little one?" Mia blinked in surprise, her fingers clutching the warm bundle. "Thank you." The woman just nodded and walked away, eyes flicking briefly to Lenani, nestled in the sling across Mara's chest. A few days later, as the snow began to pull back from the fence posts like tide from shore, the widow Claiborne trudged slowly up the ranch path, her gaits stiff, her shawl pulled tight. She said nothing as she sat down a cloth sack on the porch, only nodded once sharply before turning to leave. Mia stepped outside just in time. "Ma'am," she called. The old woman paused, one hand on the gate. "Where are we going?" Mia asked, voice soft. The widow didn't turn. Her shoulders rose and fell with a quiet sigh. "Because it ain't the baby's fault, and it sure as hell ain't yours." Then she was gone, her boots crunching down the path. Inside the sack, Mara found warm knitted blankets, a jar of amber honey, a tin of salve for cracked skin, and at the very bottom, a hand-sewn baby bonnet made of soft blue cotton with tiny white stitches along the edge. Mia held it to her chest, suddenly unable to breathe. Inside the ranch, Kalen spoke little, but his hands worked like prayers. He reinforced the fence line with new cedar posts, even as the cold bit his skin raw. He hammered the barn shut with audible latch, mended the broken hinges on the cellar door, and replaced the padlock on the front gate. Every action was quiet, precise, protective. One morning, Mia stepped out with Laney wrapped snug in her arms. She stopped at the porch steps. Colin was crouched by the gate, sleeves rolled, cheeks red from the cold. He stood slowly as she approached, wiping his hands on a rag. Mounted on the gate was a wooden sign, hand-carved and simple. The letters were uneven but deep of the three of us. Her breath caught. She didn't say a word, just stood there, clutching her baby close as something warm and fierce bloomed inside her chest. Then came the sound of boots thewing. Finn barreling out the front door like a windstorm, blonde hair wild, cheeks flushed with joy. "Hey, Mama!" he shouted, flinging his arms around her waist. "Can we have bread and honey today?" Mara dropped to her knees, eyes full, one arm around Finn, the other holding Laney to her chest. She buried her face in Finn's shoulder and held on. He didn't wriggle free, didn't ask why she was crying. He just leaned into her like he'd done it 100 times before, like he belonged there. And maybe he always had. That evening, Mara sat on the porch as Thiessen bled gold across the hills. The snow was melting, carving little streams that whispered of spring. Colin joined her in silence. Behind them, laughter rang out, Finn's voice chasing shadows down the hall. Laney's soft coos closed behind. Mara turned her face to the wind, and for the first time in years, it didn't sting. It felt like home. By early March, the snow had melted into soft, uneven patches along the hillside. The air carried the scent of thawing earth, damp pine, and the faint sweetness of sap rising in the trees. Ice, once thick on the windows, had loosened its grip entirely. The wind, once a howling threat, now came as a gentle breeze, brushing against the walls of the cabin like a familiar friend. Chickens scratched curiously at the thawed soil near the barn, clucking softly as if surprised to find the ground again. Smoke from the chimney curled into a pale blue sky. No longer a lifeline, just comfort. Inside, the cabin smelled of warm bread, cinnamon, and a trace of lavender from the dried sachet hanging above the hearth. Laney, now fuller in the cheeks and stronger in her kicks, lay in the handmade cradle Callan had sanded and reassembled himself. Each time Finn leaned over her with a picture book in hand, she kicked excitedly, gurgling and squealing as if understanding every word Finn had taken to reading aloud, tracing the pictures with his stubby fingers, mimicking Kalen's deep, quiet voice. Once upon a time, he'd say with exaggerated seriousness, before breaking into giggles when Lanny reached out to grab the page. Callan, once silent as the snow drifts, now spoke in low tones more and more each day. The words came slowly, some stilted, some unsure, but always with care. He practiced them with Mara in the quiet hours after chores, sitting by the fire while she mended clothes or shelled beans. In the evenings, he read to Laney Aney, Just a linear two from a book about farm animals or weather. But his voice was steady, rough, real. That morning, Mara stood alone on the porch, a worn mug of tea nestled between her hands. Her eyes roamed the wide land beyond the ranch, the fields greening softly, the trees on the hills dusted with the first hints of buds. It felt like breathing after holding your lungs still for months. The stillness wasn't heavy now. It wasn't the quiet that came with hiding or fear, and it was calm. It was peace. She heard the creak of the cabin door behind her but didn't turn. She felt his warmth first, the familiar presence. She now trusted like sun after frost. Then his hand settled lightly on her shoulder. In his other hand, he held a small plaque smoothed around the corners, carved with careful hands. He offered it without a word. She took it and looked. The letters were imperfect, uneven in spots, but unmistakable. Family is something no one can take from you. She didn't cry. She'd shed enough tears in the cold, but she leaned back into him just enough to let his arms slide around her waist. "I believe that," she whispered. Later that day, they all sat on the front steps. Mara with Lainey bundled in her arms, Kaylin beside her, and Finn sprawled against his leg, a crust of bread in hand, sticky with honey. Lainey slept, one hand curled inside the collar of Mara's shirt. The sun spilled gold across the fields as it lowered behind the hills. No one spoke. They didn't need to. They had survived the storm, not just winter, not just Roy, but the kind of storm that threatened to erase a person's place in the world. Now they simply were together. And enough. If this story stirred something in you, if you held your breath when she offered her baby for bread, if your heart clenched when he opened the door, and if by the end you believed in a kind of love that grows quietly between scars and silence, then this tale was meant for you. Hit that like button if you felt the weight and warmth of this journey. And don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Love Stories, where every week we bring you more tales of untamed hearts, fierce devotion, and romance carved into the dust and grit of the American frontier. Tap the bell so you never miss a story where love is louder than gunfire and home is built, not found. Until next time, ride safe and remember, even in the coldest storms, love is the fire that never dies.